Vault number 6 is Brad Backer. Brad was born in Maryborough and moved to Brisbane in 1978 to play with the East Tigers, where he won 2 premierships. Making his Origin debut in the inaugural match of 1980, Brad went on to play 3 games for Queensland in the Origin arena and 12 overall. Brad was a member of the Brisbane side, captained by fellow Folk Norm Carr, that made the 1979 Amco Cup final in Sydney, beaten 22-5 by Cronulla. Brad finished his BRL career at Wynnum Manly.
Well, Brad Backer, thanks so much for your time. What does it mean to you to be a Fog?
Proud. I think I grew up in an era where, I think I had 13 games for Queensland, and if you talk about interstate, it was 10, and 3 within that was State of Origin. So I had the resident side as well, which we'd go and play New South Wales and get a touch up. And then prior to that, listening as a kid, growing up, of people that I looked up to in Maryborough and Wide Bay was our region. Bunny Pearce, Harry Pickering, people like that. Gary Pearson was from our hometown, all making Queensland sides and, striving to Collie Weeks, striving to be the best, and some of them got to play for Australia, but, trying to beat New South Wales for a series was always the holy grail, let's say, going back to Monty Python. But so you had that sort of passion that you wanted to actually be in a position. It would be good to have an opportunity to be in a position to be on even keel with New South Wales. And so, I think it's sort of come from that, and I think Choppy takes that to a next level. It's just the pride of being able to compete at an even level.
We'll get to that first Origin match and that time in history with regards to interstate and Origin in a while. But I just want to go back to growing up in Maryborough. So many sports Queenslanders have come from regional areas, country towns. Tell us what it was like growing up in the Wide Bay region in Maryborough.
Oh, it was good. It was a country town. There was only 20,000 people, and Harvey Bay was just down the road and they had about 11. Now it's, they've flipped it, they're 50,000 and Maroon's still 20. But everybody knew everybody. Sunday football was everybody would go to Estelle Park. You had all the teams playing at the one ground. They had 2 fields, reserve grade play on one side and the main, my first goal as a kid was being picked for the A grade side for Western Suburbs to play on that main field, so, and then you had next sort of little goals that play for Wide Bay or make the Maryborough side, then play for Wide Bay, because you had all these good players ahead of you that you used to see them every Sunday, even as a kid, going picking up bottles and cashing them in for 5 cents or whatever the change was back then, but you'd always be watching the main games that were being played. And they had some great players come through there. Even Peter Lobergeiger and those guys come up to Maryborough and coached, and so it was a pretty good comp. And then if you got picked from Maryborough, then you played for the 47th Battalion Trophy, which was included Gympie, Bundaberg, Lower South Burnett, and that was the Wide Bay sort of region. So it was good.
Were you from a rugby league family, or just what everyone did in Maryborough?
No, people did a lot of things. Back when we were young, and then even my A grade, we'd go put in a surfboard on a car and go down to the Sunshine Coast and surf on Saturday, stay Saturday night, and then drive back and play football on Sunday. But going back to the family, in our family, I have a life member in one of the clubs, Billy, my uncle, great uncle actually, Bill Stewart, and he played football till he was 40 something, so it's always been in the blood. And we had my great uncle was a Joe Kincannon, 1911. He played for Queensland from Maryborough, only 1 game. And in 1924, on Dad's side, his cousin, second cousin, was Roy Backer. He played for North Queensland, but he was born and bred in Maryborough and then went up there. So there was, on both sides, there was football in the blood.
So when did it get serious for you? You spoke about wanting to play A grade and then wanting to represent Maryborough, then Wide Bay, etc. When did you start getting serious about your footy?
I think it was even when I was under 18s at that time. We had a great side there. We won the Wide Bay 47 battalion for the under 18s, and they had some good players come out of that. And I think you never had an aspiration to be, so far ahead. It was just naturally, and it wasn't writing down goal. It was just, at that point I wanted to play A grade, and I was playing A grade then. Then I wanted to make the Maryborough senior side, let's say, and then Wide Bay side. I want to make that, and then it was Queensland country. That was a goal. So I think I was serious from about the 18 mark. Yeah.
So you made that Wide Bay side, and that was your first representative taste. It was a different era from what we have now with the NRL, with the Cowboys involved, etc., and opportunities for players are much greater now. Were you moving to Brisbane? Was that a choice that you made? Did the East Tigers approach you? How did you end up in Brisbane?
Yeah, that was a good question. That was 1977. And I'd made the Queensland countryside, and we played Brisbane, and Jack Gibson was our coach back then, 77. We had Ron Massey and Mick Suter were the trainers. They were from Sydney. They'd come out of East. 1975, they just won the grand final. It was 6-7. I think Jack was obviously out of a job, so he was appointed by the QRL to take over the Queensland camp. And Alan Smith was in that as well. And I've got a photo at home of us down at Davies Park after a training with Jack and that around it. He'd hand-signed it. And, those things mean a hell of a lot to me now, but at the time they still meant a lot because I, used to look up to the Sydney football. So it probably come from that. I had an inquiry from Valleys originally. They used to get, every now and again, you'd have some stalwart from the clubs would get on the road and go around and have a look at, not like they do these days where they go to under 15, 14 carnivals, but, they'd probably get around. They heard, and they might have a contact from one of the towns that say, well, come and have a look at this kid or whatever. So they initially made a sort of a bit of an inquiry, but nothing serious, as if you're looking to come down, give us a call, And then I had a similar thing. I had a knock on the door from, or telephone from somebody at East. And they said, oh, look, do you want to come down, come and have a chat to us? And I just made that 1977 Queensland side to play Great Britain. So I think there was a training camp or something, so I come down for that and went to the Leagues Club and saw them. And at the time, they were heading towards 77 East won the grand final, right? But they'd lost a number of games before that. So they had Steve Stacey had just come in, and they had Johnny Callis, who was the current Queensland winger. So you had two Queensland wingers, basically. And people would say, well, why are you going to East? They got two Queensland wingers, And I even sort of thought, I picked them because, one, they were the head of the crew in offering, but also they were a side that I liked as well, with Desi Morris and Langy and Alan Curry. And so if you're going to go and be a winger, why not be a winger in a team that is a good team. The challenge of having two people ahead of you, well, my dad said to me, and I've even said it to my kids, and I still remember it, first of all, he said, well, you got a good job here, And I said, but this is what I want to do, Dad, He said, well, go and do it. And he said, back yourself. And I still remember that. It doesn't mean you've got to put the work in, but back yourself and have a go. Yeah, so that was the catalyst for going to East.
And what was it like moving as a country boy from Maryborough to Brisbane? A little bit different in today's market, but what was it like back then?
Similar sort of, problems that you come up against. I was lucky. I had the secretary from Western Suburbs in Maryborough at the time was Johnny Rule, and he was transferred in the railway to Brisbane. And the house was in Merton Avenue, which leads up to the Bogger Road jail, And so I stayed he opened the door and said, come and stay with us for the year, which was good because I was, away from home, and you're only 20 or 19 or 20. And it was only up the road to Langlands Park, and where I worked was South Brisbane, so was going to work with South Brisbane. And Kay was his wife, and they looked after me like a son, for that year. It was great. You come home from training, you get your meal that put out and whatever. But so that was very handy. The thing I do remember, and this is why Des Morris is very, very dear to me, I got invited up my first time to go up to Channel, I think it was Channel 7 then. It was Mick Vivers and George Doniger and that up at the T. They come up for the footy show, like on the Saturday morning. And Des said, they've invited you up there, this is after the Woolies comp, which is the first comp in the season. He said, he could have just said, well, you got to make your way up and then go and see him, and But he said, I'll pick you up. He said, and I'll take you up, and and so he put me under his wing basically, and he probably recognised coming from the country because he was an Ipswich boy himself, and just tried to make that transition a bit easier. And that's the type of person he is,
Well, it worked because the dreams were realised. You ended up playing for Queensland, winning premiership with the East Tigers as well. Before we get to the Origin phase and playing for Queensland in the Interstate Series, what was it like playing in the BRL at that time when I think it would be fair to say a golden period, one of the times of rugby league in Brisbane? Yeah,
I think it was a golden period, and it's evident by even that first State of Origin. You had equal representation from the guys who were in Brisbane and the ones that had, come back, and only some of them had gone, like Roddy Morris had only gone down the year before, and you know what I mean? So that gives you an indication. And Greg Oliphant, they'd only gone to Balmain sort of that 79, so around that time was pretty special. It was a tough comp. The rules were different, The thing, you did have only 2 reserves, so that when you're on the field, that's why the game's changed so much. And blokes like Wayne Lindenberg would come into their thing when the boards got tired and whatever. But it was a good comp when you had Redcliffe and Valleys and all those sides had great players, Tony Ops and all those. That was a step up from playing in Maryborough week to week. But I still you're training more to accommodate that. But still, when you're on the field, there's some pretty tough guys out there that were running around. Yeah.
And you look at the Queensland sides that you played in pre-1980 Origin, even in games 1 and 2 of that 1980 Interstate Series.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about some future immortals. We're talking about Australian players who are in the early stages of their career. What was it like playing in the interstate matches in those days?
Well, it's the same. I think we were just underdone a bit, just to the speed and the you can't make an error sort of attitude. Like you come back to club football, if you made an error, you'd make up for it, sort of thing. I think when you look at that, like Wally and Mel and Chris and there was a lot of players, Chris Close, they were in this 1979 side, and you knew they were good players. How good they were going to be, it's hard to sit there and say. But, I knew the likes of Wally was special. Playing with Wally or against Wally playing against him was hard, you know what I mean? Because as a winger, his kicking game was unbelievable and he was tenacious in anything he did, But he was still only young and raw too himself, And it comes back to that 79. I remember it too because I was in the side and I heard Wally talk about it. We went to Leichhardt Oval and we got off the bus and this is our first game down there at Leichhardt Oval, representing Queensland against New South Wales. That's where you used to play the state, not at cricket ground or anything. So it got to that point, they'd shiv us out to and the crowd was pretty good. It was like pretty packed. And we walked in, and I think it was Patrician Brothers with Sterling was in the school side playing some other team, right? So when we went into the sheds to get dressed and we come back out, all those people had gone. So there was about 2 and a dog watching a state game, So I think that's stuck in the young guys' claw because it's like, well, hang on, that's disrespecting, you got people here who've been picked to play for Queensland, and you're not showing due respect to actually stay and watch the game. You'd pay to get in, and you'd gone home because you'd watch the college game, let's say, beforehand. So, but I was probably on the cusp of. I was older than those guys, so you could see that whatever was building there was going to be very, very strong.
What are your memories of the talk about Origin and Ron McAuliffe's idea to have the guys come back from New South Wales and, state versus state, mate versus mate? What were your memories of that time and your thoughts about whether, A, it would succeed and how much you wanted to be a part of it?
Oh. Would it succeed? I thought, yeah, it would succeed, given the right opportunities and because I knew those people that I was playing with, and even on a weekly basis, even the likes of Norm Carr and those guys, they're really good competitors, and they could hold their own in a team that was equally balanced. You know what I mean? So yes, and at that stage, yeah, I wanted to be part of that for the reasons I said. The growing up as a kid and always sitting there waiting and hoping for that series win or even a game win, to be honest. So yeah, I wanted to be involved in that. The concept, it was mooted a little bit, and it was in the papers, and yeah, it sort of got my interest very quickly about that concept.
Your memories of being selected, the opportunity to play in Origin 1, as opposed to looking back on it now, what were your thoughts heading into that game? What were your expectations? What was the anticipation like?
Well, initially I got selected. I was actually the reserve. Quinny was...
Graham Quinn?
Graham Quinn was going to be in the centres, and I think... I can't remember, but one of them was going to chop. He might have been on the wing or whatever. And then Quinny couldn't make it, so Choppy's gone into the centres and I've come into the what's the name. But, that all happened within a day, because I think it was selected that Sunday night, and then we were going to go into a camp for a little bit because Arthur and all them were going to come back. And I think Graham had got hurt that day with St George. So, yeah, I went from the night being reserved to in the game. So going into it, yeah, I was excited. The first training session to me was excited because I was, I liked Rod Reddy as well, come in and you're mixing with people. Because really, you look at the players that came back, you had Smithy was down playing for Norse. You had Ollie was down at Balmain. You had Rod Morris was down at Balmain. You had Langy was at East. So these were people that had only a year before yet they were classed as, coming back from Sydney. You only really had Rocket and Arthur were, long-term Sydney. But I sort of, you learned a lot from them coming into because it was more professional than what we were in Brisbane at that time.
I've heard first gamers talk about running out behind Arthur and what it was like with that home crowd.
The noise,
and to be behind Arthur Beetson. What are your memories of that?
Oh, memories was a little bit like, it was a lot. Yeah, it was just you ran out and the noise was deafening, and it was so much so like I played in grand finals at that point at 1978, and while there was a noise there on that day, on the Sunday, this was unbelievable. And you knew, there's probably about 90% were all rooting for you, you know what I mean? So, yeah, that was unbelievable. I think the thing I'd remember there was how Arthur just settled, myself, and probably did the same thing to everybody else. Just made you feel before you ran out, So it wasn't like, I'm the captain and I'm doing this and whatever. He actually, made contact with you and he sat down beside you, and yeah, it was, that was special too.
Trying to work out how to put this question without making it sound not so much derogatory, but almost demeaning. After having played in that game with Arthur as your captain and the noise and the excitement of Queenslanders, did it then become a little bit difficult in 1981 playing games 1 and 2 as an interstate series after being through Origin. Did you know then, after Origin won, that was the future and that we needed to get to 3 games? What was it like coming back and playing for Queensland for those first 2 games of 1981?
Yeah, I don't take it as derogatory in the sense that if you're picked for Queensland, and that's one thing that I believe, even Queensland as we know it now, the State of Origin, started in 1980, but playing for Queensland started in 1908. And that's the thing that stays with me, because I know there's a lot of people played before us who were very, very good players, and currently you don't get wrapped up in, let's say, the State of Origin bubble. So I think any time you got to put on, and you listen to Gordy talk, and I smile every time, I'd love to play with Gordy too, but every time you put on that jersey, you're representing a state, and you're representing the people also who've gone before you. So yeah, it didn't sort of, you didn't think, oh, I'm going out playing this and I'd rather be playing State of Origin, but I had a feeling, I didn't know it'd be like it is now, I had a feeling that it could go to the 3-game series of that concept. And then obviously when we had that game in 81, which was the 3rd game, and they did it, then they made the decision. Yeah, so I don't think it changed thinking when you have the jersey on, you're still representing that jersey. Yeah.
Yeah, and out of that side, that first side, you mentioned about the players coming back, and those that coming through hadn't been to Sydney yet. I think close to 90% of that team, roughly, played in Sydney. You're one of the few that never went to Sydney out of that original Origin side.
Yep.
Why?
And Scotty.
Yeah. And I think.
Why? Well, I don't think that. Well, I did have a chance. It sort of the opportunity come up with Parramatta, and and it was before the dynasty actually. So, but it just never went any further. I think the main catalyst for not going any further, I think there was that was back in the day when, right, they'd open up the concept. Now it was, the other New South Wales clubs were looking inside now and believing what they're seeing. There's some good talent here, right? So then it started, the Senators started thinking, well, how are we going to shore up the mass exodus? Because there wasn't anything around to say, well, you just couldn't, I could sign a contract tomorrow and go down. The QRL had no tie in it. So they come out with a contract that basically, if you signed it to play, and if you didn't sign it, you didn't play. So of course I wanted to play. I had a little bit of advice on how solid that was, but those sorts of things. If you went to try and contest something like that, you'd sit out a season or two. You know what I mean? So I didn't know why. I just wanted to play football, but I think I was probably getting to what was that? I was probably about 26. Yeah, so the sort of just head of that wave that was coming through with the fatties and Mel and all those guys, So yeah, it was just that wrong time, I suppose. Yeah.
Who had the biggest influence on your career?
The biggest influence, Langy and DJ, Desi Morris. DJ initially, and then Langy as well. He's proven his ability to coach. A lot of coaching is man management. It's not the football now, and yet those guys had it. It's being the person that can untap, the individuals that are in the team, and each individual's different, and I think, those two probably have a huge influence.
What do you reckon that kid picking up bottles, Western Suburbs, Maryborough, and then going on to play through the grades to get to Wide Bay and end up winning a couple of premierships with the East Tigers, and a member, played for Queensland on 13 occasions, but 3 of those in Origin, and being a member of the first Origin match and playing with some of the legends and immortals of the game? What do you reckon that kid would think now?
I think at the time he wouldn't see it, because as I explained, it wasn't a thing where I was writing in goals and I wanted to play for Queensland and Australia, and I knew the path I was going. It was just, it was come as it may, so to speak. But I think he'd be quite proud and happy. And I know that, I get a bit emotional here. But Mum and Dad would be, very happy. Well, they were, yeah.
So they should be.
They used to drive down from, because in Maryborough, you know, they'd hire a taxi to drive down for those interstate games. And then, you know, 9 times out, sometimes one time they stayed, but 9 times they go hop back in the taxi. The Starline Taxi was a cab company in Maryborough, local cab company. And they'd hire it out, and my uncle and 2 uncles, Dad and Mum. And then they'd get in the car and drive back. And back then it was like a 3.5 hour trip, you know. Yeah.
Well, Brad Backer, Fog number 6, thank you so much for your time and congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Fogs Queenslander podcast. If there's a Fog you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.